Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for joining us for a design subcommittee meeting of the Boston Civic Design Commission. Today's date is Tuesday, April 15th, and this is session A of the BCDC Design Subcommittee. The Planning Department continues to host public meetings in a virtual setting for the health, safety, and accessibility of Boston residents. I'm Christina Rico, Executive Director of the Boston Civic Design Commission and Senior Urban Designer at the City of Boston Planning Department. Before we proceed with the agenda, open meeting law requires that I notify the public that this meeting is being recorded. I'm making a recording of this meeting. Please turn off your camera and microphone if you do not wish to be recorded. And for the purposes of the record, Commissioners Eastley, Morris, and Solano are present at this time. We are also expecting Commissioners Evans and Kodoridis. I'll let folks know as soon as they've joined. Tonight's agenda will include presentations for the 10-year institutional master plan for Northeastern University and for 3430 and 3440 Washington Street, Jamaica Plain. Tonight's meeting proceedings will follow the typical BCDC design subcommittee format, beginning with a brief presentation from the proponent, comments from BCDC commissioners, and public testimony. I'm going to go ahead and promote Marianne, Victoria, and Corey to co-host as they are the first presenters. But before I do that, just a quick summary for Northeastern. A proposed 10-year institutional master plan for Northeastern University seeking Article 80D entitlement contemplates approximately 2,224,000 square feet of new construction and approximately 935,000 square feet of renovation across 8 proposed institutional projects. This will be the 4th presentation of the proposed project to the design subcommittee following introduction at the June 25th, 2024 monthly meeting and subsequent design subcommittee meetings on December 17, 2024, January 21, and then March 18th, 2025. And it's my understanding that there are no commissioners present who intend to recuse themselves from deliberation. A reminder to the proponent team that presentations will be limited to 15 minutes, and I'll give you a 2-minute warning when you're getting close to the end of that. And with that, I invite the proponent team to begin presenting just as soon as I can promote you to co-host.
Oh, and Christina, we might need, I think Kartiki's going to share her screen, so we might need to promote her as well.
Sure thing.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Is everyone promoted that needs to be able to present? Okay.
I think so.
Go ahead.
Just really quickly, wanted to thank everybody. I'm Victoria Abelina. I'm AVP for Campus Planning and Design at Northeastern University, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Corey Berg, who's the Director for Campus Planning, and our consultant team on the project that all of you have already met, but Marianne Ocampo from Sasaki Associates, and Kartiki Sharma from Sasaki. So we look forward to having this discussion. We've made a lot of progress, and we really appreciate your engagement to date and all of the feedback. And we are happy with where the plan is, and I hope you'll appreciate the changes we've made. So I'm going to hand it over to Marianne to walk us through the plan on each individual site that we focused on, based on our discussion last month.
Great. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Victoria. So what we heard from the BCDC last time we met, a couple quick things is just to remember that we were going to simplify massing. We want to make sure that we're considering the pedestrian experience. really thinking about the datums that are part of our context and how we carry those through our massing. There were also thoughts about creating additional views so we can get a couple different perspectives to understand how we're creating these urban scenes through the kind of projects that are part of the IMP, as well as where there might be connections and illustrating how the open space network is working as we think about the larger patterns that are knitted into this urban campus. So if we move to the next slide, we have our proposed plan has really, again, those three areas of focus at 21 Forsyth Street, the second being Burstein Rubenstein, and third being the East End. And so considering massing, understanding the public realm, and all with the goal of creating really powerful, vibrant urban spaces for this institution and how it contributes to larger city making. So on the next slide, we'll move into first and foremost University Bend's campus community. And this is along Huntington Avenue, and the idea of taking 21 Forsyth and rethinking this as a residential community for Northeastern students, and seeing that this massing would be responsive to mitigating any shadows that would be on the Back Bay fens, but really celebrating a public realm where we can think about welcome mats that mirror what we're seeing within this greater context of the Marino Center, as well as how we play with the kind of datums and continue that strata across the Huntington Avenue elevations. So on the next slide, what you'll see then is what we presented before, and changing the datum so that on the right side, the latest scheme starts to see the base of the building so that we've increased that base to being 60 feet high as a street wall that continues from the surrounding kind of buildings, and in showing that massing change to maintain the datum and more pedestrian scaled experience along Huntington, with a 5-foot step back as you move towards the tower where there will be housing. And then also thinking about the setbacks and the welcome mat at the corner, which is mirroring the Marino Center Plaza, and thinking about these different plazas as small, medium, large, as they start to round around the kind of intersection of Huntington and Forsyth Street. So on the next slide, what you'll see then is an existing kind of view from the Green Line, looking at that crossing of all these students crossing the street, and then moving to the next slide, what you see is that same vantage point, and then understanding how 21 Forsyth on the right side would be designed to, again, maintain that kind of street wall of 60 feet as it starts to work across Huntington and that block. And then also seeing the kind of 18-foot setback along Huntington to widen the sidewalk so that we can plant trees, thinking about the passage along that street, as well as a 15-foot setback, which would allow you to connect towards the Back Bay fens from Ruggles Station along Forsyth Street. You'll also see the proposed Forsyth Plaza to the left. So as we enter in this area, we kind of see this major intersection between Forsyth and Huntington Avenue, and how that's punctuated with an entry that would be subject to later review with Article 80B for large project review. But just thinking about the zoning envelope of the kind of base of the building, activating that base with uses that would be more vibrant and fronting Huntington Avenue. So on the next slide, as we move forward, we'll travel to West Village and Burstein Rubenstein. On the left, you can see the existing conditions. On the right, the site that we have, combining two building sites as to one building site for residential life for Northeastern. As we move to the next slide, what you'll see then is that based off our great conversation in March, we've maintained that there's a street wall of 60 feet, which you see on the right side, that plays to the kind of proposed massing that we're seeing at 500 Huntington Avenue, with Wentworth to the right, and then trying to maintain equal, if not more, of a setback to widen the sidewalks at 20 feet along Huntington. This is in alignment with the development to the east or to the right, which ranges with a sidewalk in front of the Wentworth development of 15 feet to 20 feet. I would also note here we've simplified the massing. We've gotten rid of any cantilevers so that you have a sky view of, along Huntington, similar to what the Avenue of the Arts had mentioned in that study. And that we do have a welcome mat that we see at the kind of corner of that convergence of Parker and Huntington, with no overhang or cantilever here, but again, that sky view. So on the next slide, you'll see that existing perspective of being on Huntington, looking at that corner and proposed. You can see then a very simple kind of street wall would be through material differences that can be seen here, as well as some of the kind of massing, given that we're thinking about housing on the upper floors and really activating the first couple of floors, especially with kind of student lounge and retail space, punctuating or creating entries that are accessible off of Huntington Avenue and improving the crosswalk experience across Huntington, as well as the sidewalks that are surrounding this building site. On the next slide, per your recommendations, we wanted to look at different perspectives from the MFA lawn and seeing what this would look like from, what's the block going to become. And so this view starts to show what that datum looks like relative to how it would be a continuous street wall with 500 Huntington and move through the site. We can see the 20-foot setback. But here we also just wanted to note that we would want to create a transitional kind of plaza between the two buildings, as we're seeing towards the center of your screen, and making something so that there would be some sort of small plaza for gathering and entering through the site. Moving forward to the east end, again, this is a site where we have now rethought the Hertig-Colonnane kind of buildings into one major research and academic building, as well as Gainsborough for kind of student life, as well as academics and research, and of course the arena site at 262 St. Botolph. Here, we've been looking at the massing, simplifying it to create these different outdoor spaces that start to look at a great kind of street experience on St. Botolph, creating welcome mats, as well as a pocket plaza, kind of medium size open space that would exist in front of Gainsborough. And then how we would start to, again, work with the kind of southern parts of those development sites for movement along the kind of track, and where there would be shared service and circulation as we're moving towards the Curry Student Center. So on the next slide, we'll see then that east end and what those flows could be. So in this case, looking at the public realm and the connectivity, your migration from St. Botolph and the arena as you move towards Mugar, you can see a welcome mat at the corner of Gainsborough Street and St. Botolph, the triangular kind of pocket plaza that's bookended by Hertig-Colonnane as a kind of major architectural endpoint there, and something where we've been thinking about how you can move through that building as you're moving from the triangular plaza through the building to get towards Robinson Quad. Here again, seeing in the red what the kind of liners are that would be active existing kind of elevations or building entries, and how we're proposing Hertig-Colonnane and Gainsborough to participate in dialogue with those other buildings, and how we're forming the urban kind of public spaces and setting up some of those viewing corridors. So on the next slide, what you'll see then is that rationale. You also saw in that case some of the service entries that would be to the south on the previous slide. But again, seeing that there's academic and student life, if we go from left to right, and then research and academic, that's in the Hertig-Colonnane site. We have a continuous street wall along St. Botolph with the Gainsborough site, as well as having a kind of continuous datum at 60 feet for Hertig and Colonnane in the middle diagram. And then the active uses at the ground level to the right diagram. So you can see how we're integrating more private uses such as the pool, but lining it with active lobby space and social spaces as we front some of the public realm spaces in this particular area. On the next slide, you'll see the existing condition of what this is like today, kind of low-rise parking lots and streetscape. And as we go to the next slide, you can see this enhanced pedestrian experience, extending the St. Botolph street wall and creating that defined edge, providing a welcome mat and a major kind of entry into the Gainsborough site to punctuate the corner at this critical intersection of St. Botolph and Gainsborough Street. We have 20-foot setbacks, pretty generous size, sidewalks on Gainsborough Street. And then we have a 15-foot setback that increases to a larger triangular plaza that you can see with the bookend of the Hertig-Colonnane building really being this kind of transparent ground floor use where you can enter through the building to move to Robinson Quad. So you see these transitional spaces that we're creating to enhance that public realm and create porosity through the buildings and in between the buildings while maintaining the kind of contextual datums that are playing to different parts of the kind of district in this area. So for the Forsyth Street campus community, we have the three major development sites of the UR complex, the Forsyth building, as well as Cabot. Again, a major industrial kind of area of the campus and historical. And so as we transform the campus, it's a reminder that we're really rethinking the academic core, and that Forsyth Street becomes part of this new center of gravity for academics and research, as well as campus life. So what is that experience as people move from Ruggles Station towards the Back Bay Fens and Huntington Avenue? So for us, if we move forward on the next slide, you can see that this is one view of Forsyth Street overlooking towards Huntington Avenue. And what that experience is like. If we move forward, you can see the proposed kind of viewpoint, again, looking towards 21 Forsyth. You can see that little tag in the very back, seeing a glimpse of that residential tower, but creating this active, vibrant spine that is contextually sensitive to the low-rise buildings with the 60-foot podium, active ground floor uses that would be transparent. And then as we move towards along this road, maintaining a generous sidewalk of 15 feet with the setback of new developments, that would be also embracing smaller kind of plazas that would be part of the entries into the new buildings. And then on the next slide, we can see that this is part of our public realm framework that we talked about. In yellow, you can see the pattern of pedestrian and public realm paths. There are these arcs that are starting to connect what is a kind of array of different geometric patterns of the campus as outdoor spaces and building sites. So as we look at this, we can see that there are these diagonals that exist from Forsyth and Huntington. As we move towards the library, we have these certain arcs that are also positioning patterns of movement. On the left side, what you'll see is, based off your comments, the kind of shared zone with Dana, what is north of Dana and south of our new Forsyth, east of the UR complex. And knowing that this is a major zone for parking, as well as service. Here, we've revisited creating the northern part of that area to be primarily for pedestrians to really protect their movement from the UR complex as we're moving through that zone. And the image at the bottom shows that half of that shared zone already has been renovated to create this beautiful little corridor plaza for pedestrians. So we need to create the missing link that recaptures some of that surface parking into a pedestrian zone that would begin to connect to that image on the left. So if we move to the next drawing.
Just a time check, Marianne.
Oh, okay.
I think you might be
Actually-
close to the end here anyways.
We are at the end, actually. This is the end. I thought there was one more, but thank you, Christy. Right on time.
And commissioners, I just wanted to acknowledge that Jonathan Evans and Kathy Kodoridis have joined as well.
And I think that they were both here for most of the presentation, which is great. Well, I'll dive in. I think that the idea was that we would have these sessions with you all as a way to kind of dive into some of the massing, to think about open space. And I think the notion is that today is the kind of wrap up where you're bringing it all together. And I appreciate the presentation, Marianne. I think it was really clear and touched on all of the pieces that we had raised in that March subcommittee, which feels like it was just last week. So thank you for being comprehensive with our request. I had a couple of comments. I'm going to go in the order that you presented. And some of the slides have slide numbers on them and some don't, so we may have to hunt around for a few. So the first is that I think we all understand that this is an ADD. We're going to be seeing these projects again as you all continue to work on them and they become more real. And so I wanted to start with 21 Forsyth. I wanted to go to the, gosh, maybe I can, yeah, that's fine. Slide 5. Either slide 5 or slide 7. Let's try slide 7. Maybe 2 from here. Okay, this is good. And so as we're thinking about that, kind of the purpose of this ADD, IMP, and then we're thinking about what comes in future. You know, I look at this diagram and I'm thinking through the comments from our last go with all of you and appreciate you starting to think about that data, starting to think about, well, how does the original carve out and welcome mat begin to correlate with this new form? And even though this is reading clunky, we understand the intent. And so I would just suggest that as you're presenting this, if we go to the full commission, that there's just a nod to the fact that we're kind of in this transition between ADD and ADB. And some of these buildings, like Bernstein, Rubenstein, are a little bit more developed, and then you kind of hit a stark podium that looks like it's not developed. I think just letting people know that that it's kind of in process would be really helpful. But I, especially for 21 Forsyth, really appreciate the datum because it brings both sides of the street together, the Marino Center, and then the building that's just beyond the 21 Forsyth. I think it makes a lot of sense contextually to me. So I appreciate you looking at that. The Bernstein Rubenstein, we can either do slide 11 or 13. So on this one, I really like that this has become a flat iron building, that there isn't this complicated undercut and cantilever. And my main comment here is that I appreciate that simplicity. And then if you go, I think, to slide 13, again, I think that the messaging here from your side is, again, that the kind of top of the building looks more designed than the bottom where it's hitting the podium. And so it's a little bit confusing graphically. And also the entries are rather flat because you haven't sorted that out yet. And so I think it's just a matter of either graphically making this more similar to like slide 21, where it's kind of a massing rather than showing articulation that hasn't been worked out yet, or making sure that your narrative is very clear about the fact that we're kind of in between here. But I think the flat iron works a lot better. I think the site is so complicated that it just helps to simplify what we're doing on this corner. And then kind of the nod to 500 Huntington with the street wall. I personally feel like that 21 Forsyth is more important for kind of that datum than this site, because you're only really giving a nod to one building that ends up, not being a historic development, but a new development. But I appreciate where you're going with it. And then going to the East End. We've spent a lot of time talking about this part of the project, and in the plan views and some of the plan views that you shared, I thought, yeah, this one is fine. Where we're talking about Hertig and Cullinane, I know that we have talked about whether that diagonal can come through and directly connect to what I think is Robinson Quad. And so as you guys are working through the program, you'll sort that out exactly, Marianne. And so again, we're at an ADD here, thinking about what are the macro moves, and so just something to think about, since that's definitely been something that the commission has raised about just making those connections, and not only making the pedestrian connection in a more clear way, but actually making the visual connection, that as you're coming kind of with your back to St. Botolph and crossing through that building, that you're automatically aligned with Robinson Quad, I think could be a really beautiful statement. And then just two other comments on slide 18. Thank you for removing the barnacle from our May conversation. This feels much clearer to me. And even looking at this one again, because we didn't have this one for our last meeting, but it's also really clear where the entries are to the two buildings now, as you're essentially coming from the arena. And I think that clarity goes a long way to helping to mitigate some of the kind of confusion on campus in terms of buildings having a more odd geometry. And St. Botolph here has an odd geometry itself. And so I appreciate that. And then the last thing that I would add, and just thinking about this project, is that I think it could be really helpful to begin with that kind of larger scale open space diagram or diagrams. And the reason is that when we began this project, when we first saw this project in full commission, one of the recurrent themes from commissioners was that it felt confusing. It was hard to understand the organization of the campus. And I know last time we kind of drew the smile, or we drew the two arcs through the campus as a way of kind of helping ourselves to understand. And I think it's just a really helpful way to explain what you're trying to do, and then all of the ways that these new projects touch some of these big moves that help to reorganize the campus through all the grade changes and building geometries. I think could be really helpful. So that was really an epiphany for me in that March meeting, is to really understand, okay, this is how you actually move through the campus. It's more of an arc, and it's less of a, going from quad to quad. So anyway, I think it's been great. You guys have been really responsive to all of our comments. And in some ways, I think it's helpful to take almost a step back to that massing for some of these projects, since they're in between, and allow us to kind of assess the massing and the space making based on those kind of bold forms.
Yeah, I would happy to build off of that. I think this has been exciting to see evolve. I'm probably caught in between the maybe sort of eagerness to look at some of these buildings at a much more granular level that I think will come as part of later submissions. I realize what this is at this moment. And I guess maybe to that end, maybe my I guess comment or encouragement is I appreciate this sort of 60-foot datum that we're sort of that's being established. And I guess again, as we get to the project by project level conversation, uh, that I think each building has to have its own attitude towards what that means to its form and its massing and its identity. I think like the Bernstein and Rubenstein one, for example, on slide 11, I think that's one where it's almost a very severe urban design diagram where it's like I appreciate that that's clean, but now we have this very clean implication of a different attitude towards the architecture from above and below 60 feet, right? And I don't know if we want it to necessarily be that aggressive. So all these are things that I think is probably front of mind for you all as you kind of take this to the next step. But I appreciate kind of setting that as again, a datum, a thing to understand and to sort of react off of. But yeah, at a high level, this is all exciting to see and excited for kind of next steps here.
Could we go to slide 13? Just have a question. There's the note about the transitional plaza, about the program flow between buildings. Could you show me that in plan? I see it. And then what's between those buildings? Just a passageway?
No, there's no through connection because
I
there's
see.
an elevation between Parker and Huntington.
So it's just that corner plaza.
Yeah, I
basically.
actually I can give a little more color. Now
Sure.
that you're asking this question, I realized that the drawing doesn't reflect it, but one of the comments we provided as part of the 500 Huntington Avenue review was that them pushing against that, how the base here looks like it kicks out to be parallel to the lot line. And we pushed back on that. And I think the final design actually took that away and created a hardscape plaza with seating so that we can have a reciprocal hardscape plaza and have a little bit of a breathing room. It does not go behind a building.
Okay.
But it does have some, smaller scale frontage on Huntington Avenue that separates this large lab building from, what we knew we would want to be a residential program was active student ground floor.
Right. Okay, thank you. And then could we go to the east end? And let's start with the plan. Oh, thank you. So I know that this has been worked on so much and it's really advanced itself, but I can't help but ask about the service areas and how those are going to work. And in particular, at the Curry Student Center, with that service entry deep in, does it need to be that deep in?
So that is an existing service area. We're not changing it. And yes, it does. It's actually there. It's at a very different elevation. It slopes down towards where the arrow is. And it provides also accessible entrance into Mugar. but it does have all of the service of the student center loading, and actually that other blue arrow is also serves as our accessible entrance into MUGAR and is also loading and access. So that is an existing condition that we can work to beautify, but it is not something that can be easily changed without redevelopment of MUGAR.
Well, I have a question. So basically, if I were to draw a section through this, if you have the building, you go down, and then am I going back up to this path?
Yeah, so the path is ramping down from Krensman towards Robinson Quad. So that path there is a zigzag, yep. And then the ramp comes down parallel to MUGAR Wall. And what you see, a pedestrian through connection through Curry Center, is an entire floor below Krensman Quad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You've worked so hard everywhere to really improve the circulation, and you know, service areas are just the bane of institutions. You know, the way that I see a plan at this moment in time is that there's lots of opportunities for the landscape. You just have to have the space needed to do those plans later on. So I would encourage you to, as you move through this, to just continue to look at those surface areas and how they cannot interrupt the flows that you've made. You know, I understand you can't, but just as a diagram, I would prefer almost not to even have that path, because you're kind of dragging people back to a pretty miserable condition, I think. I mean, maybe it can be better. I don't know whether or not how elevations work, but maybe in the future, look and see whether or not there's any capping that can happen on that surface area, or something that gives more back to the landscape. I think Robinson and the space between Gainsborough are pretty well behaved. It's just the one at Curry that stands out. And I understand you have an existing condition you're trying to meet. Every time I've seen this plan, I wonder about whether or not people are really going to cut through Hertic to Cullinane. And I'm curious if you all have had that conversation as well. And what I think about, even though this isn't what you're doing, is in what is now the Smith Center, when it used to be Holyoke, trying to cut through, and it was almost impossible because of the wind. You could barely open the door. And so I just wonder how well that will be used. I get the diagram of wanting to connect through, but
yeah, so we actually, it's interesting. You make a great point. It depends on whether there's an active use inside. So we see this with ISEC, the way, which is our research building that was completed on Columbus by Payette. There's a through connection from Columbus towards Pedestrian Bridge. And now that there is a very good coffee shop inside, students go through it all the time. Before, when they didn't like the vendor, they went around.
Oh, interesting.
So it's really about the programming inside, but it is faster, to your point, is to go around the building than it is to go through the building. And because you're navigating other people, you're navigating furnishing, and we try to activate every square inch of our interior real estate usually.
Yep.
So what I've seen anecdotally, we haven't done a PED study, is that when they like something, they'll go inside and through and then come out on the other side. But generally, they will walk through the kind of landscaped area and stay outside if they're just passing through. So I think that the bigger traffic flow will be through around. But I think if we do, if you know, not if, but when we do the development and redevelopment of Herta Cullinan, if we invest, that's an opportunity to invest into making that service road pedestrian, to have dual uses with
Yeah.
landscape and protection and signage, then that will be even a faster way to get to Gainsborough if students want to go that way. St. Botolph and the rec space there.
Right. So could we see the perspective that looks from St. Botolph that's this way? I think it's maybe the one after this, but I'm not sure. I've lost track. Oh, yeah, there we go. So I wonder, you know, and this is future, right? Because you know, when we look at these master plans, right, we do the best that we can do for the information that we have, but you know, life changes, and I still can't help but wonder whether or not someday this might be on columns at the end, just the way that is, so that you kind of have this rhythm of open and maybe giving people a choice to go around that building. But again, I think that's when you get, you know, when this is built, you'll know a lot more as you start to plan those other buildings. But I do appreciate how much you've done at this end. I feel like we're in a very different place than when we first saw that. And then I wanted to go to Forsyth, I think I have it right. Oh, yeah, that's perfect. What is this building? Or is it what is that? Do you see, I'm sorry, do you see where I've circled right next to Dana?
Small one. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that is our that's our Latinx center. It's a teeny tiny building, but it's
Yeah.
if you've been to our campus, it's very colorful and has kind of murals splashed all over it.
Yep. And then I wanted to see the view that you had about the shared space. I think there's existing on the left-hand side, it was a photograph. Just want to make sure I understand that. Oh, there we go. If you don't mind zooming into that just a little bit.
I can't zoom in, but I can just maybe like make it bigger so that I can just,
Well, that'll
Yeah.
work too.
yeah. 1 second.
So orient me. Where is the shared space now in this?
So
Am
this
I-
is so this is actually this is kind of in response to I think you've been pushing on this service road versus
have, yeah.
pedestrian. Yeah,
Yep.
which I really value that comment because I actually feel like it's such a characteristic of our campus where our service roads are often pedestrian connections. And so this is a space that was previously parking. It's just next to our library. So you exit out of the library, you look left, and this is a space that we really activated for student use. During COVID, we had little bonfire areas and heaters. And it's just become kind of this like quiet space, but it abuts directly, you know, the loading area and
Yeah.
parking that's
Yeah.
needed for the Latinx and buildings there.
Yeah.
Um,
And so then this space, are you saying that this space will be treated similarly? In other words, there's going to be some precedence given to the landscape in that area?
yeah, I think it's more this acknowledgement that all of our pathways need to really have some service function. But I think this is kind of an inspiration of if we could continue this sort of treatment here so that you still have that service function. I think it's worth noting that kind of south of Dana is really the primary pedestrian connection to
Yep.
Centennial, but we are, you know, by nature of unkinking Greenleaf Street by the UR complex, this could become maybe more of a pedestrian desire line. And so even just continuing some sort of paving pattern like this might make it feel a little bit more welcoming, I guess.
Yeah, and I also think about this connection, right? That's a pretty tempting entrance into this kind of great courtyard space in the back. So I'm glad to see this photograph that actually there's a precedence for this on campus. And so you've got, I think you've got your thinking right about that. And that's really all I had. I think that the spaces that you've made for the landscape to develop and evolve over time are really sharp. And I hope I live as long to see it all implemented, but it looks terrific. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Catherine or Kathy, any comments before we see if there's any public comments?
You all have shared everything I was going to talk about, so thank you.
All right, thanks, Catherine.
Same here, although I just want to commend you for the general flow through the campus to not just the internal portions, but how you've met the edges and how you've met the surrounding communities. It feels much more comprehensive and thoughtful and engaging to the surrounding neighborhoods. So I know that was a matter of conversation really early on. So I commend you for that.
Thanks, Kathy. So, Christina, I don't know if we have any public comment, but I'd love to leave some time for that.
At this time, we'd like to invite any members of the public in attendance who may wish to contribute public testimony to raise your digital hand, and I'll call on you. If you're calling in by phone, dial *9 to activate the raise hand function and *6 to mute and unmute yourself. Please state your name and any relevant project affiliation information, and please keep your comments to 2 minutes. Commissioners, at this time I see no hands raised, so I'm going to go ahead and close public testimony period. And we don't need a formal vote since it's design subcommittee meeting, but we do need to make clear what the next step will be.
I feel really comfortable having this go back to the full commission. I feel like the questions that we've asked have been looked at, and I think we've had some more suggestions here from commissioners, which hopefully can get wrapped up into a updated presentation. How do others feel about that? Kathy, I'm seeing head
Yeah,
nodding
I
from
agree.
you. Okay.
I agree.
Catherine,
Yeah.
Laura. Okay. Sounds like we have consensus, Team Northeastern.
Great. So we will bring Northeastern's IMP and the ADB application for Matthews Arena together back to a full commission quite soon. Thanks, Victoria. Thanks, Corey. Thanks, Marianne.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
you
Really
all.
appreciate your guidance and all the comments. Have a great night.
You too.
Thanks.
Alrighty. So our next presentation is for 3430 and 3440 Washington Street in Jamaica Plain. Just a quick preamble here. A proposed project at 3430 and 3440 Washington Street, Jamaica Plain, seeking ADB entitlement, contemplates the development of approximately 225,000 square feet of mixed uses, including approximately 12,000 square feet of ground floor retail, 256 dwelling units, and 142 parking spaces in 2 buildings on 2 sites that are approximately 1.25 acres in total. This will be the first presentation of the proposed project to the design subcommittee following its introduction at the December 3rd monthly meeting. It's my understanding that there are no commissioners present who intend to recuse themselves. A quick reminder to the proponent team that the presentation will be limited to 15 minutes, and I'll give you a 2-minute warning when you're getting close there to the end. With that, Mark, Joe, and others, I'm happy to promote you to co-host if you're able to start sharing your screen.
Thank you, Christina. Can everyone see this all right?
Yes. I just want to make it full screen there.
Okay. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Mark Sullivan from Chu & Company Architects, architect on the project at 3430 and 3440 Washington Street. It's nice to see all of you. We will quickly go through our presentation and look forward to receiving and hearing your comments after this. So this presentation will be on our project at 3430 and 3440 Washington Street in Jamaica Plain. The project consists of 2 lots with frontage along Washington Street and are bisected by Rockville Circle down the middle, with Kenton Road being on the right side of the 3440 Washington Street site. I know Christina kind of gave you a quick overview, but we are working with 2 different buildings, a total of 230 residential units. Both of these buildings will be mixed use with about 6,340 square feet of retail and commercial space on the ground floor along Washington Street. The 2 sites reside in a local industrial zoning subdistrict, and they fall within the Plan JP Rocks overlay, the planning overlay. The proposed 3430 Washington Street site building, which is on the left here, is 6 stories, while the 3440 Washington Street building on the right here is proposed at 5 stories. So kind of most importantly, what we heard at our last meeting, it was quite a while ago, but the end of last year on December 3rd, we wanted to kind of give a brief overview of what we heard and how we responded. So in that meeting, you asked us to provide a clear overview of the site context as it relates to the project. You wanted us to look at the building massing and scale as it approaches the residential neighborhoods to the south of both of these sites. You wanted us to explore open space, specifically along the ground floor and all sides of each building. You also wanted us to take a look at the materiality and its contextual relationship to the surrounding neighborhood, and to establish a sense of gateway through this massing and open space kind of combination. So where we kind of wanted to start was to provide a comparison graphics. So this is where the site plan programmatically was last time you saw it. Notably kind of smaller setbacks around the site. We're taking up a majority of the site on the ground floor. And then this is where we are looking at in the site plan now. Some kind of key components, which I'll get into more detail as we progress. But we've pulled back basically on all sides of each one of the buildings, notably on the rear of the 3440 site, used to be 10 feet as a setback. We pulled that back 20 feet. We've introduced a kind of new typology of these townhouse units that occur along the ground floor that help kind of descale this ground floor massing as it approaches the residential neighborhood to the top of the screen here. As well as increasing open space in kind of numerous locations, including the front along Washington Street, and specifically along the sides down Rockville Circle and Kenton Road as we approach both of these residential kind of fabrics to the south of our site, but to the top of this screen. So this was the massing and kind of how we were seeing it 3-dimensionally. And like I said, I'll kind of get into more specific details, but just as an overview, this is the massing as you had previously seen it. Both of them include 2nd floor courtyards, but a lot of the massing really hugging the sides of that residential neighborhood, and this being Washington Street at the top here, or at the bottom left here. So the massing and maybe not doing its best to transition as we had discussed. And then this is the massing now. So as mentioned, I'll get into much more detail on it, but the courtyards being positioned not only for kind of natural light, but also to help step down that massing as we approach that residential fabric. Some other moves along, again, the ground floor in terms of open space to create more open space, to still programmatically get kind of a unit count that we're looking for, but to try to accomplish these things that we had mentioned last time. Just to take a step back and kind of give you an overall sort of breakdown of the site. This is show kind of contextually what we are working with, the two sites being in red here. So part of the JP plan, or the plan JP Rocks, is to, along the Washington Street corridor, there's a density bonus increase, which kind of creates this strong spine of density along Washington Street. Now, these are showing some of the other projects that are not only being built, have been approved. Some of them are already built that are consistent with that kind of height threshold that I was speaking about earlier. But this starts to kind of get into what we're trying to bridge. So that density increase coming along Washington Street corridor, but then how do we descale that and start to step not only the massing, but increase the ground floor open space as we approach those existing residential neighborhoods to the south of our site. And then across from our site, just to give an idea, that density increase comes along until we reach like the English High School athletic fields, which kind of splits the frontage on our 3440 Washington Street site. Just quickly giving an overview of what exists there. Currently, there's an automotive shop and a gas station on the 3440 site. And then these are just some existing photos of what the site looks like today. So programmatically, we start to see some of these changes here, where the orange is representative of the pedestrian pathway, the blue being kind of the vehicular path. But the introduction of those townhouses and kind of pushing that parking inward has allowed us to, in our opinion, create a much more kind of robust, not only kind of landscape zone along the edges here, but also to engage more of the pedestrian scale and feel along the sides here with more glazing and windows along these townhouse units rather than kind of the blank walls that are a natural circumstance of a parking garage being on the exterior wall. The entrances to not only the retail and the residential lobbies are again on Washington Street. I'll get to it in a little bit, but we have created this kind of nice column arcade of exterior space. Both of these entryways have also been pushed more interior to create a more robust sidewalk and create much more of a public kind of plaza at the entryways along Washington Street for both of these projects, or both of these building sites. So last time we were here, we were asked to really take a look at some of the massing moves that we wanted to exemplify through this design. And I think it really steps down to, or we've digressed it down to kind of 4 steps that we've taken. The first kind of 2 being following the plan JP Rocks in terms of the density allowed, the setbacks required, and some of the setbacks that we need to have the complete street or meet the complete street guidelines. And then the next 2 really describe more of how we're trying to transition this massing from that kind of commercial density on Washington Street corridor down to the more residential scaling of the residential along Rockville Circle and Kent Road. So the first step really becomes those courtyards, those second floor courtyards. On the 3430 site, we kind of have much more of a natural buffer to the rear in terms of open space. There's about a 64-foot difference between the edge of our building and the neighboring home. On the other side, there's a small road here. And then on the 3440 site, we decided to shift this second floor courtyard to the rear, not only to gain more natural light, but to also really descale the massing as it gets to the residential homes along Kenton Road. And the reason being is because those homes are actually right up near this kind of property. Now, not only did we step it back 20 feet, the whole building, but we also include this courtyard that kind of steps it down further to those 2- and 3-story residential homes. And then the last step being to create that open space. So it kind of, the way I describe it is kind of 2 methodologies here. One being along Washington Street corridor, where we push in the entryways and create kind of that public plaza area, some seating areas, some raised planters. And then along the sides of Kenton Road and Rockville Circle, we start to push the massing back as well to create more planting beds, wider sidewalks, and those kind of recessed entryways for the townhouse units. And that continues around the back of each one of these buildings on the rear of each site. Just some more massing and scale in terms of the details of that. So that kind of front entry courtyard along Washington Street, the front, the plazas along Washington Street, the courtyards occurring on the second floor. We also have introduced kind of these balcony spaces that really only start to occur as the building moves back to the south towards those residential neighborhoods, which you can see in some of the later renderings, but you can start to see here on the corner of Kent Road and back here on Rockville Circle. They also occur on the 3440 site on Rockville Circle as well. And then these column arcades on the corner that help really emphasize the corners and hold the corners in terms of that recessed entryway, but also create kind of an outdoor public space that wraps the corner down Rockville Circle. So in terms of looking at open space, again, I'm going to kind of categorize this in terms of 3 different zones. One being the Washington Street corridor, where we're recessing the entryways. We have some raised planters with some kind of built-in bench seating. We have a 6-foot minimum furnishing zone with some bike parking. We're also including a blue bike station, 19-dock blue bike station in front of the 3430 site. A brand new bus stop, bus bulb with a bus shelter on the 3440 site, and then some kind of landscaping that weaves its way in and out of this kind of public, newly created public plaza. And again, the setbacks along Rockville Circle and Kent Road start to increase. Previously, they were about 8.5. So as you can see, we're really trying to increase that and create kind of a planting buffer on both zones that help transition the feel of that sidewalk to that more smaller scale residential to the top of the screen. So taking a look more at the kind of detailed front on Washington Street, again, introducing new bus stop areas, all new sidewalk trees along the front here. That kind of public plaza feel where we're highlighting the entryways with these raised planters that have bench seating similar to the image that you can see here, that start to highlight these entryways. We also do that through materiality, which I'll get to in a moment. On the corner of Rockville, we highlight each kind of corner with these colonnade or column arcade outdoor areas, so that becomes usable for the retail. It's perhaps moments where we're creating bench seating and creating moments to stop and gather along Washington Street rather than just kind of pass by. And then this is starting to take a look at that view. So that's that column arcade that we saw on the plan view with some outdoor seating. This is kind of the corner of that blue bike station. We have that 6-foot planting zone with the sidewalk trees. So this one is out in front of the 3430 site. And then that column arcade continues on the other side of Rockville Circle. Again, kind of holding the corner strong and pushing in at the entryways in the center of each building along Washington Street. And then this is taking a look at that raised planter with the bench seating, the bus stop in front of 3440 Washington Street, and again, how kind of all those components interact and that experience along Washington Street. And then taking a look at the sides, again, we're undulating the facade of the townhouse residential units that start to occur along Rockville Circle and Kenton Road. And this creates kind of a unique opportunity for kind of planting on both sides, where we have planting in front of the townhomes, and we also have and then we have sidewalk zone, and then we have a planting zone outside of that where sidewalk trees occur, and how that kind of steps back and starts to undulate. Hopefully it in our mind anyways, transitions a little bit better to that residential fabric rather than just a flat wall of parking, obviously, that doesn't have as much dynamic feel to it, to the facade. And then that's a view down Rockville Circle, kind of getting the idea of that, where you start to see really more of the landscaping come into factor as you move down Rockville Circle. This is kind of that corner of the column arcade that wraps the corner on the 3430 site. And then taking a look at Kent Road, you can kind of see that more as an elevation, how that starts to occur. These are those townhouse units that start to break down the scale. We play with kind of materiality and how that works, where the massing kind of brings down some of those residential materials, and that landscaping buffer zone that starts to transition into the residential fabric. And then the last zone being kind of the rear, where, as mentioned on the 3440 site, we're stepping an additional, we were previously 10 feet off of the property line. We start to create this path that's gated on either side that becomes entry points for these townhouse units that wrap the rear. So that's now 20 feet as a setback. So that allows us to create a planting buffer zone between the existing home and the existing multifamily here, as well as create a pathway, an accessible pathway that enters all of the townhouse units, and then also another planting zone in front of the townhouse unit. So a more robust planting area. We also are planning for kind of some small seating areas that we're kind of continuing to develop along this kind of multifamily site as it's more open and lends itself to that. And then at the 3430 site, as mentioned, we kind of have this more natural buffer zone of landscape. So these are existing trees that exist there today. Our setback is 11 feet, but we are providing, again, we have that additional kind of landscaping zone with the street that runs as an extension off of Rockville to the south of our site. And then this is taking a look behind the 3440 site and giving you an idea of the kind of different conditions that we're trying to accomplish with the rear and those townhouse entry areas. So part of it on that, the single family that's along Kenton Road that directly abuts us, we've been in talk with him in terms of what he may be looking for in terms of 6-foot privacy fence, but still trying to maintain the kind of planting zone and walkway along the back there. In terms of materiality, we're trying to take some context clues from around the neighborhood. This building being a little bit up on Washington Street, up north on Washington Street, also a residential building. Predominantly found as a lot of brick along Washington Street. We want to try to continue that motif and then move to more residential neighborhoods as like a metal or fiber cement siding, a more of a lap siding look to it that that starts to transition material wise to that residential fabric. But as you can see, the brick really, what we're using it here is to highlight the corners of each one of those buildings. And then the top floor, the recessed top floor starts to step down material-wise to those entryways and starts to highlight those entryways. And that's kind of our goal with this material palette as it stands right now. We did want to create a little bit of difference with the material, I guess, palette stays the same between building and building, but the colors start to change a little bit. We did want to create a little bit more of a dynamic feel between the two rather than just one kind of larger massing.
Just a quick time check, Mark.
Sure. Thank you. And then, so the last kind of part of this is different views around the site and what we're trying to accomplish and hopefully accomplishing, but I'm sure we'll be anxious to hear some of your comments and how we can further improve this. That gateway experience on Washington, so this is looking at the 3430 site mainly, but the 3440 site being kind of on the corner here, a little bit further down the street. So this is Kenton Road coming out here. And then this is a building that's already been approved by the BPD, separate building, but giving you an idea of that kind of street wall along Washington Street. This is a look from Rockville looking back towards Washington Street. That second floor courtyard you can see here. And you start to see those balconies step back and in our opinion, trying to kind of further step away from that massing that was currently there as well. And then those townhouses start to create much more of a dynamic kind of facade along Rockville Circle. And then this is further back down Rockville Circle, looking up again at Washington Street. And again, we felt comfortable that the massing could stretch a little bit further back on 3430 because of that natural buffer, where on the 3440 site, we kind of want to step it, I guess, further away from the residential direct abutters. This is taking a look at from Kenton Road, so you can really see where that courtyard starts to step out. Those balconies start to further take away in the massing. The top floors start to step back as well, and it starts to really meet the scale of the abutting home. This is the abutting home on Kenton Road to our project. Material-wise, we start to bring down the massing, moves into that townhouse, but then once they become their own kind of freestanding component beyond that, it changes back to that kind of brick material. And then taking a look from the other way from Kenton Road, looking up towards Washington Street, again, that second floor courtyard where we're going to have kind of a robust planting area around the edges of it and move that kind of amenity deck more to the center, and how that massing right now anyway steps down to that courtyard. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. Appreciate the presentation. And as commissioners are gathering their thoughts, I just wanted to make a couple of comments. The first is, can you remind us which way is north? Can you put a site plan up quickly?
Sure. So north is kind of the north arrow's up here, but it pointing down left here. So south is the residential neighborhoods are more to the south.
Okay.
North is kind of at this corner here.
Okay. Okay. So it's kind of that sun is hitting the kind of map top of these two projects. And the other request is if you can toggle between slides 6 and 7. Just a couple of times for us. They're the before and after. So what we saw the last time and what we're seeing today, that'll be really great. So this is the before, right?
Yep, before and then after. Again, before and then after.
Great, thank you so much. I'll make just a few overarching comments now and then come back after other commissioners have had a chance to make their comments. The first overarching comment that I'll make is that I think that the 4 months were really well spent when we saw you at the beginning of December to when we're seeing you now. The massing changes, at least for me, have been largely positive, and I'm sure that we'll hear more comments about that. And my second overarching comment is that commissioners as a group, as we're thinking about engaging more with our partners in planning, just as we did in December, offering comments for that group to continue working with the proponent alongside of our own process, we should feel comfortable to do that again today. As a way to really advance some of the thoughts and advice and recommendations that we have here, and allowing that team to further those comments. So I just wanted to kind of set the table with those two things. And with that, I will see what commissioner comments we have.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And I can take it from there. I agree. I think this at a high level, the massing changes make a lot of sense, and I think help to kind of bring light into the center of the open space. I think it definitely helps to sort of mitigate and meet the neighbors a lot nicer towards the back edge there. And I guess I'll start from a public realm standpoint. I think when I look at the ground floor plan along Washington Street, I think one question I have, or something to maybe kind of consider, that's fine. Yeah, that's a good one. Is I think all of the strategies make a lot of sense. I think the idea of setting back is smart. I'd love to see a section to better understand this colonnade, because I maybe am a little concerned that might be too grand of an architectural move for the scale of the building. And so really how much space do you have in that zone for seating, for spill out space for a restaurant? It looks like it's pretty narrow. So that's sort of maybe one question. And kind of in that vein, and I guess I'm curious, is there any opportunity, and again, I say this with some sensitivity to, you have a program, you've got a pro forma, all that stuff, but could the residential lobby maybe be biased to one corner, not the other, such that you might have a bigger retail space that could have some more ability to perhaps allow for a larger plaza? Because I guess what I'm looking at is you've got a lot of like it's like the same section all the way across both blocks, which there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But I guess if you're trying to create a spill out space, that might want to have a little bit more room to breathe. And what are sort of levers to pull to perhaps make that happen? But again, I think what you're showing here, there's a lot to like. I think the moves are strong. I think again, for me, it's that section of that colonnade space to make sure that space really has enough kind of integrity. And yeah, it looks like right now you're showing a difference between some areas. Again, you're showing that spill out space, but then like at the corner on the right side, you're showing kind of a raised planting bed in front of that retail. So, is there sort of I suppose that's already implying a certain not a bias, but like some retail spaces get the spill out, some don't. But again, I think all the sort of the strategies make a lot of sense there. And then I think on the building side, I like the slide you had on materiality. I think what was interesting there is I would maybe applaud I applaud looking at a lot of sort of high quality materials. And I think this stretch of JP has certainly evolved a lot over the last 15 years. I worked on the second from the left building there. So I kind of know it pretty well. And I guess maybe what I'm curious about is how is your design kind of maybe, yes, acknowledging this context, but what are the sort of larger overarching moves that allow it to sort of speak its own voice and it's not just a collage, right? And I think you started to get at that when you sort of mentioned, like, I've got these brick things at the corner. I think that was a nice kind of narrative and a nice sort of way to sort of create some order. But then it's like, why are we switching from light gray to dark gray metal panel in the middle? Let me walk that back. I'm not necessarily critiquing that, but I guess I want to sort of understand what the rationale is as part of just a like kind of, you've got a lot of nice moves here, and how do they all tell a story or work together?
Absolutely.
And maybe the last comment, I think it was a slide after this one that showed a perspective that showed wait, one more after that. I think that showed the
Oh, did Jonathan freeze?
I think so.
Oh, I'm so curious to hear what the comment was.
Me as well.
Maybe we can come back once Jonathan signs back.
What is your attitude towards place?
Oh, Jonathan, you're back. You froze on us and we were waiting with bated breath to hear your comment. And he froze again. All right. We'll come back and try to grab Jonathan in a minute. Other commissioner comments?
I have one.
Go ahead, Catherine.
My main one is, in looking at the entire presentation, I'm actually curious about the perspective from Amory Street or William Street, and how that actually tells the whole context of the building. There's a lot of angles, which is great, but in terms of the story along Washington Street from either those streets, from the athletic multiplex field that's looking towards that space, I don't have that perspective to gauge. So I'd be curious to see that in that landscape as part of consideration for this future presentation.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine.
Jonathan back on, or?
He's just signing back on now. Laura, did you want to go ahead while he's...
Sure. I wanted to ask some questions about the parking on all of the streets around the developments, both buildings. Could you, just go to a site plan and let's.
Yep.
That's great. So where is parking?
So what currently exists there, actually most of the Washington Street for both of these sites is curb cut, massive curb cuts. This is a gas station, this is an automotive shop. So there's really currently not much parking out in front, almost at all on Washington Street. Along the corners, somewhat similar, there's some larger curb cuts that exist at the beginning kind of Rockville Circle and Kent Road. As of right now, the only curb cuts we're proposing to close all of those up. And really the only curb cuts that we're creating are these entryways to the parking, are on-site parking. So we envisioned kind of a drop-off pickup area along the front here beyond the bus bulb of the 3440 site. Yep, exactly right there. And then along the front here of the 3430 site. So yeah, the bus bulb, obviously, there wouldn't be parking directly in front of that.
Right,
So-
but this is drop off and this is drop off. And I'm not quite so sure I understand it on the other building on Washington. So these are
we just don't
bikes.
have the bus bulb coming out, but yeah, our idea was still to have basically a parking lane along this curve here.
And on that one, it exists the entire length. Is that right?
Yes.
And there's no
Correct.
bulge out at the corner.
Yeah, there's no bulge out for like any sort of, this is just for the bus bulb. So that was why that extension is there. There's nothing at this corner currently. I think probably the parking would tend to be not obviously right in front of the blue bike station, as the difficulty of getting around it. You're probably not dropping someone off right in front of. So this blue highlighted area most likely wouldn't have parking all in front of it. So it'd basically be along kind of this area that you highlighted on the right side and then beyond that blue bike station.
Okay.
Was our thoughts anyways.
And then what about Rockville?
Rockville, I mean, we're keeping the sidewalks as they are today. There has been some parking on the side. They're both Rockville and Ken are fairly narrow. So I don't foresee necessarily a ton of parking, but we're not limiting the street parking along Rockville Circle. So whatever exists there today could still park there, with the exception of these curb cuts that we are making to enter each parking garage along Rockville Circle.
And then could you explain the blue bikes? Are they only in that one location at 3430? I think I have it right.
Yeah, so when we were talking with the planning department, they expressed the need for putting in the 19 Dock Bay. The idea is that obviously it could service both buildings or residents of both buildings, or shoppers or commercial users for any of these retail spaces. But we are putting the entirety of the 19 Dock Station as it comes as one in front of the 3430 site, just because of some of the restrictions that we had with the bus stop over on the 3440 site. It's kind of what dictated it being out in front of that one. And then just largely also because of the space it takes up, it would be kind of difficult to fit it along Rockville or Kent Road without significantly, obviously, stepping back.
Yeah, and more than that, I was sort of wondering whether or not you'd ever looked at, doing this in sections to allow for some more green. I mean, you've kind of limited your green to this corner, right? And then, I mean, blue bikes are not the best looking things, and it feels like you're cheating the landscape a bit on that building, or the public realm, I guess, by having that long bank of blue bikes. And again, that's just something that can go back, and you can speak with planning about that. The thing I'm more concerned about is the space given to the public realm on Rockville and Kenton, but in particular on Rockville, because you have such small, I think I thought on another plan when I was reviewing this beforehand, that you have, I don't know, something like 3 or 3.5 foot planting strips for the trees, which is so narrow. I mean, trees really can't live in that. And so I don't know what you can do there. And in fact, I was going to ask you, what is the difference in terms of the setbacks on Rockville from now until the previous? You had 2 plans that you were kind of comparing before.
Yeah, so previously we had about 8.5 feet, which is giving you that like 3.5 foot planting bed that you're talking about. on both of the roads. This Ken was a little bit wider at 9 feet, kind of the whole length besides this kind of indent area. So now on the 3430 site, it's set back a lot more just because of the kind of feasibility of honestly fitting in the units and how we're kind of fitting some of the parking. The 9 foot was continued on this side of Rockville Circle. And part of that was in correlation with that kind of multifamily that has a similar size sidewalk. We felt that it was okay to kind of continue that. And then it steps out further at these townhouses. Now that 3 foot planting zone for the trees, or 3.5 foot planting zone for the trees has remained the same. And I think that's mostly due because we created another planting zone on the other side. Now, I think we could obviously look at that and see if maybe it deserves to be one side.
Yeah.
8.5 to 9 up to 12 to 14, at least towards the rear. The front, like as I mentioned, is a little bit tighter.
Yeah.
Towards those retail spaces.
Well, I think I'd like you to work with your landscape architect to look at the real viability of those plants and whether or not some needs to be taken away from the townhouses, or whether or not it's just a particular type of tree that has a limited, it doesn't have to be shade trees. There's lots of opportunities for that, but it's just kind of a rural urban condition for trees. And if you're going to bother to plant them, why not just make sure they live? And then I'm not quite sure I understand on 3430, the area where you have 38 feet. Is there a gate? I'm sorry, a fence here or somewhere?
No,
I
so
know there's one over here, right?
Yeah, so well, I'll kind of try to explain this. So currently there's no fence either, obviously, side of the property. There's kind of a basic fence towards the back here. We're removing all of that. We're working closely with the neighbor that lives in this home right here.
Is that the green home that you showed?
Yeah, it's the green home in the rendering. So we're right now proposing a fence and to give them almost 10 feet of kind of our property in terms of creating a landscape buffer. That fence really only occurs next to his property. From there, we're not actually fencing in the sides here. We're keeping this in terms of landscaping and everything else. So there's no fence that occurs on either site after that. Okay. The 38 feet, so our property line ends kind of at the end of this path right here. That's right above that 11 feet. Currently, there's a grass field. Let me see if I can grab an image just so we can quickly see what I'm talking about here, because I think I have an image. Can you see the right side here?
I can, yep.
Yeah. So on the right side, that's that kind of existing grass area that already is there. There's some trees that exist there. And then there's this extended street driveway that goes up and kind of to the back of our site. So on this aerial, it comes up here and then comes back to this wooded area where to meet these multifamily residential. So that's kind of that 38.5. We're trying to give context to that. We don't, unlike the 3440 site, we don't have a property necessarily abutting right up next to us. It's more what we're calling is kind of a built-in buffer zone that exists off of our site. But did that explain some of your questions? Sorry.
Yeah, it did. And then if you could go back to one of the aerials of the buildings themselves, I just had a question. Okay, go between those two. That one to the, So this is your previous plan. Is this still being developed as an open space and it just wasn't rendered, or has that been abandoned?
No, it is.
To the other
both
one.
of them are still, both of the courtyards are still open spaces. We're just working on the development of
Got
those.
it.
As mentioned, both of them will include what we had in mind anyways, and what we kind of do with a lot of these second floor amenity courtyards is at least a landscaping buffer that occurs between the edge of the building and the deck space, as well as the edge of the building where it meets the exterior wall. So kind of on all sides, we try to develop a landscape area, not only because you have residential units looking directly out to deck space and for privacy, but also just for the edge condition, we think it looks better. So you see it obviously more clearly here, but we are still developing the actual kind of uses that are occurring within here. You can start to see the planting beds. It's just not rendered as
Yeah.
clearly in this image, but we can definitely do so for next time that we see.
Well, the massing changes are really remarkable. And as Linda said, it was a good 4 months spent thinking about that. I think you have better buildings. And certainly they feel more in context than the other ones did. So I'll stop there. So, most of my comments are about the public realm and making sure
Yep.
that it works and that you're not sacrificing it too much.
Yeah,
So thank
absolutely.
you.
And we'll take a look with our landscape architect on those specific conditions and try to bring you something, hopefully better for next time.
Thank you. Otherwise, a really clear, great presentation. Thank you. Although
Thanks,
I wish people would put north arrows on their plans.
I know. That's why I did ask to go back because I was trying to remember.
Yeah, I apologize. I have it small up here. Next time, I promise you it'll be very visible so you can see any questions asked.
Laura, thanks for your comments. We have Jonathan back with us, so I wanted to give him a second to finish his thoughts. And then Kathy, if you have any comments, we will we'll give you the floor after that.
Thank you. And then sorry to break up there. Yeah, I think my comment on the slide was I think this kind of pointed to, like, I see a similar brick cornice detail between the approved under construction building and your building. And it's like, well, is that intentional? Or it's not a value judgment one way or the other, but I guess just having an attitude about how you're developing your architectural language relative to the context and what are things you're building off of as part of your, again, understanding how you want to sort of root this in place, but still, have its own identity.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
But again, a lot of nice moves, and I think for me, it's just like how do they kind of come together better and tell a clear story.
Thanks, Jonathan. And I'm glad you could rejoin us.
Sorry about that.
Last
Yeah.
comment. No worries. Kathy?
Thank you. I will only add one thing to the already great comments made, and I too agree that a lot of really good work has happened here that responded both to our comments, but I think better responds to the neighborhood and the context, and especially on Kenton Road. I think the introduction of townhouses and a lower scale at the rear is such a better connection to what is largely a 1.5 to 2 story house, in single family, 2-family house situation going down the rest of the street. So I think it's far more respectful of the surrounding area, and I'm so glad to hear you're working with the abutting neighbor. As the landscape goes, I'm no expert on any of that except to say that it feels to me as if that needs a lot more granular attention when working either with the planning staff or if there's any further work here. But it seems to me that figuring out a way to make sure that those street trees have a chance to survive, and that the lower rise landscape features are also successful. And to that end, Washington Street's a little bit of a concern, and I know it well. It's a fairly narrow part of Washington Street, or that area is fairly narrow, and I guess I worry a little bit about buses and other the relationship of buses to any of the trees that are right at the edges of the sidewalks. I just think that there's a lot that that portion of Washington Street can be somewhat just to navigate by car. So that would be it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. I had kind of 3 general comments, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll start with just a larger one, which is, this is such a tight urban site. And I think the comments you're hearing from all of us reflect the fact that when you have these tight sites, the massing and the open space become even more important, and getting that right is really critical. And so, amazing strides since December, and I think that there's still a little bit of work to be done on both of those, but from my perspective, huge improvements. The second is actually echoing what Jonathan said. He and I had the same impression, and that is, just a lot of material moves here without a clear understanding from my perspective about why the materials are changing so much. And nuance to that, I just wanted to pull up, if we could, slide 16. And this, oh, perfect. And this is about material choices. And so just something to think about and work together with planning on. When you're thinking about the material palette, and I think that's on slide maybe 25 or 23. One concern that I have, yes, and if you don't mind just going back to 16, one concern that I have is the material choice for the areas underneath the arcade. And, just thinking about that contextual kind of palette and some of the other images you've shared with us about, what's going on here in the neighborhood. I just worry that having this dark of a material on the inside of the arcade is a little bit out of context and may just make for a very dark space, especially with, the type of climate that we have here in Boston. So it's something just to think about. The images that you shared with us of other buildings along Washington Street all have lighter and brighter materials as they hit the ground. And I think it's just worth looking at that again and studying to see if that's something that could work here. And then the last comment that I have, if we could go to slide 26, and then we'll go to 28 after that. Bundle of comments is really about what's happening here on Rockvale. So this slide for me, and let me just grab my pen here. I guess my concern, and what I would love for you to think a little bit more about, is that we have a big departure here in what's happening with this building as it hits Rockvale Circle. And yet it remains coplanar. It's a big change, and yet that bottom level, we'll call it the podium, doesn't really have any setbacks or any other clues that something is happening that's very different with the architecture. I also would love for you to think more about kind of the architectural rhythm here, particularly of the piece that I just outlined, which seems kind of out of keeping with the rhythm of kind of the windows and the masonry and other parts of the building. It just feels a little bit orphaned. And then if we can go to slide 28. My thought here is similar to what we were just drawing, and that is that this area, again, a kind of large kind of architectural departure in terms of scale, again, appears to be coplanar or almost coplanar. And for me, it feels like it's a little bit of an afterthought or a tail. And so I just think that having a little bit more care when you're changing the scale of the building, and I love the idea that we're stepping this building down to the multifamily house scale, but it is, for me, odd the way that that's manifest in the actual kind of massing diagram. So just a couple of things that that I'd love for you to think a little bit more about that. And I think we've had a chance for all the commissioners to add comments. Christina, if we have public comments, and then I just took some notes about the comments and things that commissioners would like to see, and I'd love to wrap up with that summary if we could.
Yes, unfortunately, I just closed my, give me 1 second. Accidentally closed my talking points. All right. At this time, we'd like to invite any members of the public in attendance who may wish to contribute public testimony to raise your digital hand, and staff will call on you. If you're calling in by phone, press *9 to activate the raise hand function and *6 to mute and unmute yourself. Please state your name and any relevant project affiliation information, and please keep your comments to 2 minutes. I see Joy. Joy, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yes.
Go ahead, Joy.
I live on Kenton Road. I've been here for a long time. I'm very concerned about the columns in the front along Washington Street. They still look very massive to me. And I believe they said they took them from 3 square feet to 2 square feet, but they're just so, they make such a statement. And we're also worried, neighbors are worried about the visibility of drivers coming out from Kenton Road. And so I see that you're trying to get the front view. There you go. So we're worried about visibility. We're worried about them looking too massive. And other comments, I'm going to speak for some other people too. And that is that we don't want the buildings to look alike. So we're kind of glad that the materials look different. But we have an architect who lives on our street who has suggested perhaps the color changes, instead of being vertical, they could be more horizontal. And it might make the buildings look lighter, less heavy. And, one of the commissioners mentioned about parking on the street. And we just want to say that we're really happy that the developer went from 256 units down to 230 units, but there's still only maybe 150 parking spaces. And my street, Kenton Road, only has 20 houses on it maybe. So I have a driveway, but not everybody does. And we worry that people are going to have cars, more than 150 cars for those two buildings. And they are going to look on the side streets because there are only going to be 2 or 3 spaces in front of the building on Washington Street. So I'm speaking up for everybody, and that's my comments for today.
Thanks, Joy. That was exactly 2 minutes. Incredible. Folks, are there any other people here who would like to provide public testimony? All right. Seeing no additional, I see an Alcurtis. Alcurtis, are you able?
Yes, that's one. Where this step down and step back, where there's a lower portion of the building right next to the greenhouse. I think it's safe to say that our neighborhood, I'm part of the Stony Brook Neighborhood Association, and we actually applaud the developers for making this distinct difference between this massive building and presenting it in a way that it actually steps down and starts to meld into the rest of the neighborhood. This is a very small street, Kenton Road, and so is Gartland, and so is Rockville. So to reflect that this building is not so massive, to us is a good thing. And we actually like the fact that it comes down. And we're able to see at least some sunlight. We're at this point, it's a matter of a change in our quality of life here. And it's coming, it's here, but this is a good reflection, I believe. So I just wanted to say yes to this particular design at this spot for this massive building. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great. And we thank you for your comments there. Joy, I see your hand raised again.
I just want the commissioners to be aware that at the corner of Kenton on the other side, there's what's now Keegan's Auto Body. That is slated for development, and one of the slides showed a building there. So just keep that in mind, that Washington Street is getting built up and built up and built up. That's all.
Thanks, Joy. All right. Is there anyone else who would like to provide testimony? Commissioners, I see no additional hands raised, so we're going to close public testimony for the evening. And I think, Linda, you had some summary comments you're going to help us out with as we think about next steps.
Yeah, I'll kick it off, and then any that I've missed, I'll ask other commissioners to chime in. And just a point of clarification for all Curtis's comment. All right, so what I heard as part of our comments tonight were requests for longer perspectives along Washington Street. That would be really helpful to look at opportunities for simplifying the material changes. I don't think that we were speaking necessarily to having the buildings looking similar. We were just thinking about the various moves of materials and kind of having a purpose for those material changes. So we'd love to see the proponent work with the planning department on what those opportunities for simplification could be. Also, opportunities for more street trees along Washington. And a cousin comment would be the kind of setbacks and planting areas along Rockvale, that the planting materials there should be able to thrive if they are introduced. And then also to look at the architectural language of the district context as well. Any other comments that I didn't capture at a macro level, commissioners?
I think that covers it. And maybe the one thing I'll just add on to your comment about simplification is I think we say that often, and I guess I want to make sure we applaud the use of a lot of high quality materials. I think it's really just getting a clear point of view and strategy about how they're deployed, really. So I don't want to make you feel like you got to dumb it down, if you will, but more just like keep the ambition, but just have a tighter story with it.
Linda, I will add that the same thing that you mentioned about Rockville goes for Kenton as well.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. And then I didn't jot this down in my summary because it was a comment that I made, but I do think that as we make these changes along Rockvale with the scale, there needs to be a little bit more architectural delineation about when we drop to the podium scale and when we're up again at 4 and 5 stories, so that those surfaces are not coplanar. So, my feeling, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, is that, Mark, you and your team might benefit from working with planning for months to kind of think through some of the comments for today. But I think by and large, I feel very comfortable with the moves that you've made in kind of reaching your goals and thinking about the community. So I would feel comfortable after a period of time working with the planning departments, having you come back to the full commission with this project. How do other commissioners feel?
I agree.
Yeah, I'm supportive of that.
Yep.
Okay. Great. So I think, Christina, those are our next steps. Maybe we don't see you, Mark, right away, but after a period of time when you all feel like you're at a place you want to come back, we will plan to see you then.
Okay, sounds good. And thank you so much for all the comments. I think they were very, very helpful, and we will best to address all of them, and we go back in front of you. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners, for the very helpful and direct feedback for us as we think about our next steps here with the proponent team. We don't have any other agenda items this evening, so we hit it with 3 minutes left, a land speed record. So thank you, commissioners and members of the public who volunteered their time this evening, and we will see you in the next one.
Have a great night, everyone.
Bye,
Good
all.
night.
You too.